Hi, my name is Elon Osborne and I like to talk about movies, audio, and music. And recently I tried my darndest to figure out a way to put two powerhouse receivers / preamps against one another, the Marantz SR7015 and the IOTA AVX17. It wasn't easy since I can't just A/B the two systems and switch back and forth as I'm watching a movie. I have to play a few movies, take some mental notes, check my dB Meter Pro app on my phone to make sure both systems are roughly in the same range when the action is happening on screen, etc. But I'll try and break it down for you anyway on how I went about doing this experiment.
Hooray!
Since the SR7015 can process a total of 11 channels and maxes out with a 7.2.4 system, I had that as my base configuration. I'm running an Aperion audio speaker system consisting of two Theatrice T65s for my front, left, and right, a slim T65 for the center, two Verus V5B bookshelf speakers as my surrounds, two Novus N6T towers as my surround backs, two Bravus 12D subwoofers for the low end, and four A5 height modules for my Atmos layer. The AVX17 has no internal amps, therefore it needs to be exclusively powered by external amps. It also has XLR outputs to connect to those external amps, whereas the SR7015 only has RCA outputs. So another way to make it a fair fight is that I only used RCA cables for both systems, with the 7 bed layer speakers being powered by the Outlaw model 7000X and the heights being powered by the Emotiva BasX A7. For the first wave of tests, I made sure to use no room calibration software. None. I wanted to know what each was capable of basically right out of the box. I reset both the SR7015 and AVX17 to factory default, measured the distances between my listening position and the speakers with a measuring tape, level matched each speaker's volume by tweaking them until the pink noise reached 60 decibels through the dB Meter Pro app, although it should be noted that wasn't the case for the subwoofers. Both the Marantz and the IOTA's test tone through the subwoofers was pretty quiet since there's only so much low frequency information within a peak noise signal. So those I tweaked until they read 35 decibels through the app. And finally, I set my crossover frequencies according to the speaker's frequency response. For those of you wondering, all my bed layer speakers were set to 60 Hz, LFE 80 Hz, and heights 80 Hz. How do they sound? The first thing I noticed, and I know this might not have anything to do with anything since numbers within software can be arbitrary, but in order to get the systems to a loudness that I liked, the SR7015's volume was set to 50, whereas the AVX17 was set to 40. I know it's all relative, but it is interesting that while I level matched the pink noise between the two systems, there seemed to be more headroom with the AVX17. But again, that probably means absolutely nothing. I just wanted you to be aware of that tidbit. Now, as I stated earlier, since I couldn't quickly A/B test the two systems, I kept the testing down to a minimum so that I could more easily keep track of what I was listening to and any differences that might present themselves. So I watched 3 things: the entire Saving Morpheus sequence from The Matrix, including the lobby scene, bullet time scene, and minigun / helicopter go boom scene. I also watched the ocean punch slap boom pew pew scene from Godzilla vs. Kong and the bullets, boom booms, and blood everywhere scene from Saving Private Ryan. I watched the storming of Normandy specifically for surround imaging, channel separation, and dialogue clarity because there's a reason it won the Oscar for sound. It's just incredible. Although it should be noted that Steven Spielberg wanted to accurately portray the pure chaos of what went down on the beach that day, so there are times where dialogue is hard to understand no matter the system you have, because there's just so much going on around the soldiers. But creative licenses aside, the AVX17 squeaked out ahead of the Marantz. It just seemed like the dialogue was a bit more intelligible in certain spots where I couldn't hear it as well in the Marantz. It wasn't night and day, but enough for me to notice, hey, I could hear that line better. So that's a testament to a preamp's ability to separate those channels and give the elements their own little home, even when chaos is happening all around you from every speaker. It was the same with The Matrix. At the beginning of the lobby scene, the dialogue seemed to have just a slight sparkle or presence to it that the Marantz seemed to make a tad warmer and more rounded. But I didn't really notice a difference in Godzilla vs. Kong when it came to dialogue. Go figure. Both systems handled Atmos effects the same, pretty much. Nothing ever caught me off guard like, whoa, the helicopter sounds are so much more noticeable in The Matrix with the AVX17. They both performed as expected with height effects. As far as surround imaging with bullets whizzing by from every angle, the soundtrack coming through triumphantly, or other sound design elements in general, they were almost equal. The sense of immersion surrounding me from all sides didn't stand out from one system to the next, which was a little surprising though, since I thought the AVX17 would outperform the Marantz in that regard. But I think that's also a testament to using external amps for all your speakers, since the Marantz was being used in preamp mode, so it's gonna perform at its absolute best that way. Although with that many audio objects flying all around me all at once, it's also kind of hard to remember if the sense of immersion was better with one system over the other. But don't forget, this is a straight out of the box comparison with no room correction or EQ applied. More on that in a minute. But here's where the biggest difference occurred between the two systems out of the box. Can you guess? Yep.
Bass response.
I don't know enough about electrical engineering to know for certain why this is the case, but the AVX17 had better bass response, period. They were set to the same level, I was using the same two subwoofers, and again, no DSP or EQ added. Just straight bass response out of the box was more aggressive, punchier, more articulate, and more detailed with the AVX17 than with the Marantz. And while watching The Matrix, again, trying to match all the levels between the two systems as best I could, I had to turn down the subwoofers because it was just too much. It was shaking the walls way too much for my own personal comfort. I didn't feel the need to do that with the SR7015. When explosions happened during Saving Private Ryan, I could feel it more in the floor, vibrating up through the couch, and more precise hits to the chest with the AVX17. I could even hear the sand falling in more detail as part of the aftermath of those explosions. I guess you could once again equate that to a preamp's ability to separate channels better, bringing out subtle details more clearly. The SR7015 still did a great job because we are in preamp mode, exclusively using external amps, but fell short slightly with how it was able to distinguish low frequency details within the booms. Does that make sense? There's so much going on with the ocean battle scene in Godzilla vs. Kong with thumps, explosions, crashes, and missiles, and the Titans scrambling underwater, and the AVX17 was clearly able to separate those different uses of low frequencies compared to the SR7015. Now, when it came to music, Marantz is known for its musicality, so I was curious how it would compare to a preamp tuned for home theater. But the other thing to note is that I don't yet have a turntable or fancy CD player that are gaining in popularity again, so I had to just test music over Bluetooth, which you may know just isn't the greatest as of this recording. But music sounded pretty darn good on both systems. Stereo imaging was great, creating the phantom center where the vocals reside, but I honestly think the Marantz did sound a little bit better overall. Better, more crisp mid-range, and more sparkle and sizzle with cymbals and other high-frequency elements. And that is what I expected from Marantz, so thumbs up to them for living up to that expectation. Here's where things got interesting though. After running through those initial tests, I had the AVX17 still hooked up, so I decided to run the room calibration software, EQ Flex. I still didn't get that crazy, running REW and applying manual EQ tweaks. No, I still wanted to keep it simple by doing a basic run through. After I ran EQ Flex, I still went back and double checked the levels, adjusting them to show 60 decibels in the dB Meter Pro app again, set crossover frequencies again, boom. I popped in Saving Private Ryan and dude, there was a difference. Now it seemed like channel separation and object placement was even more precise. I noticed bullets being fired and coming from Atmos layers a lot more. Bass extension was still aggressive and articulate, and dialogue was still intelligible. What it clearly seemed like this time around, okay, now I'm dealing with the separate experience I was expecting. And EQ Flex isn't even the best room calibration software out there. This isn't Dirac Live we're dealing with, and yet it opened up the soundstage and made details come alive that didn't quite hit as hard before running EQ Flex. So now it was time to disconnect the AVX17 and reconnect the SR7015 and run Odyssey. And my goodness, eye-opening, and not in a good way. Remember that step of always double checking your numbers even after running any room calibration? Yeah, I went in to adjust the levels and noticed Odyssey had lowered them significantly, some as low as -8 decibels.
I'm sorry, what?
So in order to get back up to 60 decibels with my dB Meter Pro app, The height channels had to be cranked up to plus 12 dB, which is the max they can go, by the way. Crossover frequencies were all over the place too, so I had to put those back where they were. So I queued up Saving Private Ryan and could immediately tell the bass was just off. So low, even though I cranked it up in the software, so I had to go over and literally adjust the physical knob on the subwoofers themselves also. You know your bass extension is right when you feel that boat crash into the first wave about 5 seconds into that scene. When I did the out-of-the-box tests, the bass wasn't as aggressive as the AVX17, but it was even worse after running Odyssey. It was lackluster to say the least. Once I turned the knobs up, it was bigger and boomier, but still didn't rumble and hit my chest like the AVX17 bass could. The surround soundstage was good, but still not as detailed as the preamp. The bullets were flying from all directions, but that was it. Just a flurry of sounds hurtling all around. When listening to the AVX17, the bullets and ricochets had this really interesting effect. And I know this because I made sure to put this down in my notes in my phone, but there was this sensation of my skin reacting to the bullets whizzing by or hitting metal or bodies, etc. When I watch movies in here, I tend to spread my arms and rest them on the back of the couch like this, which allows me to feel the bass response a little bit more. But I didn't expect bullets being fired or hitting obstacles to make my skin twitch. But it did. Not so much with the Marantz. I've made this comparison before, but you're just dealing with the big leagues when you go with separates. Another strange thing that Odyssey did was mess up 2-channel playback when listening to music. Again, this is just over Bluetooth, but when I queued up music I had downloaded on my phone, it sounded tinny, and the vocals sounded slightly off-center to the right.
WCF, mate.
Everything's usually fine when I have the 2-channel playback option set to auto, but I went in and set it to manual and made some adjustments, and then it sounded fine. But it was weird that I even had to do that step. Again, the Marantz did seem to squeak out ahead of the AVX17 with music. They're just better suited for that application, I guess. Better highs and details with the instruments.
Recap.
So what does this mean to you, the consumer? Well, 5 years ago I would have said it wasn't worth it to get separates if you didn't care about the subtle details that preamps bring out within the mix. But now, you have the IOTA AVX17, Tone Runner AT300, and Emotiva MC1 that are the cheapest way to get into the separates game, along with budget-friendly amp options from Emotiva or OSD or Outlaw Audio that are close to, if not less expensive than a comparable AVR. The only downside, for now, is that those preamps I mentioned are still pretty bare bones compared to your average AVR. You are sacrificing some bells and whistles that come with the SR7015 like Apple AirPlay, which is superior to Bluetooth when it comes to streaming music, a better gaming experience with support for 4K 120Hz gameplay, variable refresh rate, auto low latency, etc., 8K video support, RO3D and IMAX Enhanced support, Rune support, if that's your jam. So yes, AVRs are typically loaded with more features, whereas preamps are more for audio purists who don't need all the bells and whistles and just want a beast of a processor to be the focal point of their home theater. Granted, there are feature-rich preamps out there, but that's when you're spending $5,000, $10,000, or even $20,000, which is way more than any AVR on the market right now. I love my SR7015 since I do happen to own some IMAX Enhanced 4K Blu-rays, so it's nice to know that I get the best audio experience from that disc. I enjoy RO3D upmixing with certain titles over an Atmos mix. I enjoy Apple AirPlay over Bluetooth. But then I go back to the raw, detailed, and aggressive processing that the AVX17 can do, not to mention the ability to either have a 9.2.4 or 7.2.6 configuration. So that's why, at least for now, it's going to be the centerpiece to my system until I get something better or have to send it back. Now, there are AVRs that are like hybrid AVR/preamps like those from Arcam and Anthem. They offer 7 internal amps, but can process a total of 11 or more channels with a full set of pre-outs depending on which model you get. And I've read some comments that say Arcam's stereo imaging with music blows Denon AVRs out of the water. And they're full of features like an AVR. But Arcam and Anthem AVRs are also not cheap. So pick your battles as usual, my friends. But to some of you out there, sacrificing some of those features is totally worth it in the end to take that plunge into separates. It really is a step up from an AVR when it comes to home theater tiers in general. The bass management alone was eye-opening because it made me think, oh, okay, now this is the closest thing to an actual movie theater. I get it now. So I would greatly encourage everyone who is on their home theater journey to at least consider separates as an eventual goal. Start with your budget AVR, then upgrade to an AVR with preamps, but still use the internal amps for a while. Then invest in some external amps that connect to your AVR with preamps. And once you have a collection of external amps, upgrade to a preamp to do all the processing. There's your roadmap right there, folks. Write it down. Put it on your vision board. Whatever. But just don't rush it. No need to go broke or get a divorce because you had to have a Trinoff Altitude 16. You got time. Trust me.
And there you have it.
Thank you for joining me on this comparison of the Marantz SR7015 and IOTA AVX17. Now it's your turn. Was this all that surprising to you, or did you already know the outcome? Are you considering going separate sooner rather than later with the budget options out there? Is an AVR still your bread and butter and you just want to hang on to your long list of cool features? Let's start a conversation, people. As always, please be kind to each other out there. Don't just watch TV and movies, experience them. And of course, always be listening.